5 men to win the Tour de France 5 times. Tomorrow, the 32-year-old Texan sets out to make history by winning the 6th.
I think this is going to be the hardest one yet.
I spoke to him a few days ago in Belgium. Now, Lance, you were a very, very good cyclist. Then you got cancer, and you came back and became one of the great cyclists. Now, what was it about the cancer that changed the cycling?
The illness changed me in many ways. Physically, emotionally, professionally, changed me. Changed the way that I get up every day and look at my job, look at something as simple as a bicycle. I was an athlete before I was diagnosed, so when I was sick, I equated all of that to a sport, to a race. And it was me versus the cancer. Me, who I thought was the good guy, versus cancer, who I thought was the bad guy. And I considered everything a competition. And I went out and searched for the best doctors, just like as an athlete you would go out and search for the best trainers, for the best technology. You would have that on your side, because we're going to throw everything we can at this guy. And if we start the race, let's just say it's a marathon, and you get to mile 10, you want to know how far ahead of the guy you are or how far behind the guy you are. So the whole time, I was looking at this as if he was the enemy, and I was checking myself. When we did chest x-rays, I was in there with the doctors comparing. When they did the blood work, I said, I want the results immediately, because I learned how to look at the results. I don't know if the doctors particularly enjoyed that or not, but I think in the end they want a patient that wants to live. They want a patient that cares about themselves, cares about their future.
So you say then you were driven by the fear of dying? Or the fear of this illness beating you?
I tell you, in the very beginning, I was really afraid to die at times. But once I got to a point where I felt like I was on top of the illness, it was just like a sporting event where you had momentum and you had confidence. And I didn't feel like I could be stopped. I didn't. I mean, I thought, I've got this thing. I am kicking its ass. I really did. And the doctors confirmed that. I said, guys, just tell me. Tell me I'm doing great. Tell me it's going away. They're like, look, we've never seen anything like it. You're doing great. And I would just go home with that, and that was, we got to the halfway point of the marathon, and I was 30 seconds up on the guy, and I hadn't even started to run hard.
What was actually like the moment of being told you've got cancer?
Well, I was a little bit in disbelief. I mean, obviously, nobody would joke about that. But I asked him, obviously, I said, are you sure? Could there be any mix-ups here? Can we do some other tests? Could it be another problem? That's when he then took out the chest x-rays out of the large manila folder and put them on the white screen. And, you see the lungs riddled with tumors. And then I didn't have any more questions. I mean, then I was confident in his diagnosis. And he was very, very direct and very, very blunt. And said I have surgery the next morning at 7:30 a.m. So at that point, I said, okay, this guy's he's not joking around.
And how did you feel when that was happening?
Well, I was numb. I mean, I remember leaving the doctor's office and driving home. I remember. I remember getting in the car, but I don't remember the drive at all. I remember getting to my house, walking in the door. The phone was ringing when I walked in the door, and I thought, God, this is just the worst timing. It ended up being a good friend of mine. I picked up the phone, and then I just broke down and explained to the first person that I had talked to what had happened and what was going to happen. And then from that point on, it was a chain reaction. A few more friends knew. My mother then knew. She came down from Dallas. And we just started the whole process.
What's the thing that changes you up top?
Well, it reminded me that as an athlete, especially as an athlete, you only have a short period of time to make hay. And I knew that perhaps before I took that for granted. I took my talent for granted. Didn't work as hard as I could have. And that's a shame. But when I came back out of the other side and I said, okay, I've got another chance at not just cycling, but I've got another chance at life. For me, this was such a wake-up call, and I was able to focus and be even more obsessed and possessed than I'd ever been.
You used the phrase there about coming out the other side. Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time when you thought you weren't going to get out the other side? You're going to die?
There were days where I thought I wasn't going to make it, and I think that's normal and natural. I mean, there were days that I had just layer after layer of bad news, and I think you have to prepare yourself to die, because if they tell you your odds are 50-50, while you remain optimistic and you want to be a fighter and you want to live and you say all the right things, the days are long and you have to lay there sometimes and say, you know what, I might not make it, and you have to be realistic.
What I find extraordinary is you can go through something like that and you still, when you talk, you come out the other side and you say it's the best thing that ever happened to you. Mm-hmm. When there's all the kind of pain and the grief and the worry and the rest of it. So how do you internalize it as being the best thing that ever happened to you?
Well, I think it was obviously it was a life altering experience, and I for me, I consider my life to be much better, much greater, much more fulfilling now than it was then. It's been a fast few years, and then it's not been perfect. I mean, I've had a marriage fall apart. I've had this year where I'm in Europe part of the time, and my kids are in the States. So it's not been perfect, but I still think that day, October 2nd, 1996, was a great day. It was something that changed my life forever and made me a different person, made me a different athlete.
Is there something in you that helped you get through it? A lot of people don't get through that. They get the same diagnosis, they're showing the same x-rays, and they end up not making it.
I don't know why I made it. And, for example, a kid with the same situation, same age, same sort of sporting background, he doesn't make it. I don't think anybody knows that answer.
Did cycling cost you your marriage?
It probably led to it. It's hard to say because I don't know any other. I didn't know another way. I mean, I was a cyclist, and cyclists lead difficult lives. Gone a lot, training camps a lot, races a lot of time away.
I mean, you obviously hate failure. How much is there a sense of personal failure that your marriage didn't stand up to it?
A lot. I still look back on the marriage, on the relationship, and say, okay, where did I go wrong? And now that I'm in another relationship, it's amazing what I've learned just in 8 months' time, or 10 months' time, or 12 months' time, about the value of communication and relationships, and really respecting the other person. And as an athlete, it's hard. Athletes have to be sometimes very selfish, especially one that participates in a sport that's so difficult. And then you add children into the equation, and it's a challenging time.
But how tough is that? I mean, we went 5 minutes in the kitchen. You were showing me pictures of your kids on the beach and stuff. How hard is it?
It's hard now because I'm away. It's very hard to be 2 months or 3 months away from Texas, and they stay in Texas. That's the bad news. I mean, the good news is that I won't do this forever. And in a relatively short amount of time, I'll be back home and see them almost daily.
Of course, you're now a very lucky man. You're in a relationship with Sheryl Crow, the rock singer. Are you less selfish with her than you were with your wife?
Well, I think so. I think I've learned just how to be a better mate. But Cheryl's also different because she has a big life too. I mean, she's constantly busy, and she'll be doing this for a lot longer than I compete on the bike.
Can I just ask a bit about your dad, who left you when you were very, very young, mm-hmm. and you've never had the slightest desire to see him, mm-hmm. talk to your mother about him? It's like he's just a non-person, even though he brought you into the world.
I mean, I'm very close to my mom. We talk all the time. We could easily sit down and say, okay, tell me about him. It's just never come up. It's never been my desire. It's never been in my heart to say, I want to know.
But why don't you want to know?
I don't know. That's a good question. But I've never wanted to know. I don't care much. He left when I was very young. In my mind, in my brain, in my eyes, I have no image of him. I was less than one. I have no If you walked in the room today, I would have no idea. Perhaps I'm a freak in that I can just cut that off. I didn't grow up feeling inferior or insecure because I didn't have a dad. For me, it was a non-issue.
Do you think you're obsessive?
Yeah.
Proud of it?
Yeah.
Coming up next, what it's like to be probably the most drug-tested sportsman on the planet, and the prospect of making history as a 6-time winner of the Tour de France. How do you define your obsessiveness?
Well, I like to be involved in every decision. When it comes to the team, I want to know everything that's going on. When it comes to equipment, I want to know everything that's going on. When it comes to something as minuscule as a travel plan, I want to know what's going on. Why is it that way? Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? So that kind of stuff drives people crazy. But if that's in your fiber, you can't change that. I mean, you can't say, okay, I'm going to be a passive, relaxed person. I don't care what happens today. Then you'd lose every bike race. I would lose every bike race I start.
Do you buy the idea that people who are obsessive are generally running away from something or running to something? Or do you just think you're born that way and that's always going to be...
I've never heard that. I think we're all running away from something or running to something. I mean, some sense or another.
But you're driven. If you have to work out why you are as driven as you are, where do you think it's coming from?
I don't know if it's that I absolutely want to win or if I just can't stand the notion of losing or just flat out scared of losing. And for me, scared is the right word, because scared means I have to go down and face my teammates that night at the dinner table and get up the next morning. And, for example, if I lost 10 minutes one day in the Tour de France and we still had 10 days to go, we would know that I'm not going to win the Tour de France, and yet we would have to be there for 10 more days and try and salvage something.
But why is it so scary to see you? I don't quite understand why it's that scary to see your teammates when you've let them down. I mean, people do it the whole time.
I know, but we haven't had that experience. We almost had that experience last year. I mean, there were many days last year where I think some of them thought that it wasn't going to work out, and I was going to lose. We were going to lose the Tour, and it's not a lot of fun.
In your book and in interviews you've done, you're an atheist, right?
I'm not a big churchgoer.
But you don't believe in God?
Safe to say, I don't believe in God. But
you talk a lot. When you're talking about how you came through the illness and how you do your sport now, a lot of it is actually the language of religion. You talk about sacrifice, you talk about fear and pain being good for you. So where's all that coming from?
Well, I think those are all very normal human experiences. If you talk about sacrifice, for example, I mean, sacrifice is the things you do to become the best. For me, a sacrifice is, do you give up a life outside of your sport in order to be the best on the bike? Absolutely. Do you give up dessert at dinner? Absolutely. Do you give up red wine during the season? I don't know. These are all little sacrifices. Pain and suffering, that's part of what we do. Who can argue that the Tour de France is not the toughest sporting event in the world? It's all about pain and suffering.
The way you're talking, you kind of seem a bit down on yourself in terms of where you are psychologically. Have you got to move up a gear yet?
I got to get... I have to step it up a little. I wasn't pleased with the way I felt in my final tune-up race. I didn't do poorly, but I didn't do great. I'd won that race in 2002, 2003, and I wasn't anywhere near winning this year. But I've had years like that. That's the good thing of having won 5 times in a row, because you can go back and say, okay, in '99, what did I feel like in mid-June? In 2000, what did I feel like in mid-June? My best year, 2001. Where was I in mid-June? And all of those years, you go back and you think about mid-June, and I realized I wasn't great. I was suffering then.
So you still feel like you could be on track?
I like to think so. I'm always optimistic. It's also something about having a poor performance and knowing that you've got to make that extra step. I mean, perhaps last year and the previous 2 years I shouldn't have won this race, because maybe you back off a little bit. I wasn't great in 2002. I won by 5 minutes, but Ulrich wasn't there. Other guys weren't there. Last year, won the same race fairly easily. and you go and you get tested at the tour. So, sometimes it takes bad performances to really kick you in the backside.
Is this not bugging you, the drugs thing coming up again? And I mean, you've never been able to escape this kind of
Our sport
shadow.
can't escape it. Our sport can't. No sport is going to be able to escape it. And some sports are still immune, but cycling's certainly not one of them. Cycling's in the crosshairs. And I'm the guy that's won the biggest bike race in the world 5 years in a row, and it's knocking on history's door. So of course I'm going to be front and center.
But I suppose the thing is driven by the sense that, given the sport is as tough as you've described it, given you've got to be so driven, focused, obsessive, and incredibly fit,
Right.
that it's probably, if there are guys who are being doped, that it's probably impossible to win it 5 years on the trot unless you're up to something. So that's the driving suspicion.
Well, you know what? I prefer to look at it a little bit like that, but a little bit differently, because I've been around a long time. You don't stay in a sport for 12 or 13 years if you're doped to the gills. You don't. That doesn't work that way. It's hard on the body. It's hard on the mind. The body doesn't recover from that stuff. There's no longevity in dope. There's not.
So how much does it bug you that it's just around you the whole time?
It ebbs and flows. I mean, there are years where it goes away. I mean, in the very beginning, in '99, it was the whole story of, well, wait a minute. This guy 2 years ago was on his deathbed. How can he then come back and win the hardest sporting event in the world? He's got to be doped. And that really bothered me. But it doesn't affect what I do every day. I mean, I still love my job. I'm still totally committed to it. I still die for my sport. I'll defend this sport for as long as I live. And the people who I care about, my friends and family and teammates, sponsors, they absolutely believe in me, and that's all that matters.
Well, you just said there you would die for your sport, which again is quite a big statement to make.
That is a big statement. I shouldn't have. And when I said I'd die for my sport, I thought, well, wait a minute. I wouldn't, but I would. I do love the sport. I'm a fan of the sport. When I'm 40 years old, I'm going to be the guy that sits at the front of the TV and watches the Tour de France. I just love it. I am a fan.
How much does it mean to you to win the 6th Tour?
It would mean a lot, honestly. But I try not to look at the number 6. I try to just look at the tour. And even more specifically, I try to look at just stages. I want to start the race. I want to get to a certain point in the race. And then I want to look to the first mountain stages, and then the second mountain stages, and then to the final time trial. And if I can break it down like that, then I hope that adds up to winning a tour. And then if I win that tour, then we can add it up. And maybe that equals 6, maybe that equals 7. I don't know how many I do. But it would be daunting to say, I want to win 6 tours and do something that's never been done and break records that existed for a long time that people have tried to do, they can't do.
So how bad will it be if you don't win it?
It would not be good. Not be good. But I think this is going to be the hardest one yet. I think it's a hard course, and I think the guys, the other riders, the competition are tough this year.
Tougher than before.
Tougher than before. People are more serious. People are more focused on the tour. They're focusing on training, focusing on training camps, focusing on their bikes, focusing on the composition of their teams. Stuff that we started doing 5 years ago that we talked about. You start to see now that the template that we use has been replicated.
What's your gut feeling, though, win or lose?
I don't know.
Do you normally know? When you win the first, the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth, did you know you were going to win?
Last year I thought I was going to win last year, and I barely won. And that was the first year that I thought I was going to win. Mm-hmm. I wasn't worried about it. I was relaxed. The guys, don't worry, we're going to win. And I got a haircut. So this time, I don't know.
What's it like, the tour? Just describe what it's like doing the tour.
Well, it's a huge event, so it's different than any other race. I mean, it's an event that has millions of spectators every day. It's an event that has media from all over the world. It's an event that has attention and pressure like no other. It's massive. So you feel that every day, and it's 22 days of that. But the first 10 days are critical in this bike race. dangerous. It's nervous. This year, in the first 10 days, we have cobblestone sections in the first week, which we've never done. It's a wild ride this year.
Does it hurt? Physically, how tough is it physically?
Most of the years, the first 4 years, it didn't really hurt. Last year, it hurt bad. Last year, I suffered almost the whole time because of crashes, of course. Had a couple close calls the time that I rode off into the field.
Yeah.
And then the final crash in the Pyrenees, the one day that I was lucky enough to get back up.
How much do you think about the other guys when you're out training?
Quite a lot. I mean, this time of year, we watch them. We look at the results. If it's on TV, we watch the TV. If we can't watch TV, we look at images on the internet, pictures.
And who are the guys you fear?
There's a lot of guys this year, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's good for the race. I think it's good for us. I think that it perhaps, especially if I'm not at my best, it spreads the responsibility of the race around. And we're not going to be the only team to control this race. There are other guys who think they can win the Tour, and that's good.
But Ulrich is the one that kind of keeps you awake at night.
He's never kept me awake at night. He's gotten me up early in the morning.
Yeah. But if you look back on your cancer, your marriage, your cycling career is a huge success. Your marriage, sadly, a failure. Your cancer, you would say, was the great success. Mm-hmm. Beating cancer was the great success of your life. How do you bring those together now and try and look to a future beyond cycling?
Well, I think the important thing is to remember that cancer has been a success so far. I'm 8 years out, which is not, it's a long time, but it's not forever, and this thing could still come back on me, so I still know that. I'm still aware of that. I still respect the illness. I still keep tabs on it, just like all the other bad guys in the world. I don't know where that stacks up. I mean, cycling will end, and I will be a former racer, a retired cyclist that gets forgotten like every other athlete. And I know that. I mean, I know that very well, and I'm prepared for that. I'm prepared to be the guy. And even I look forward to the time where you walk in someplace and nobody turns around. Nobody wants a picture. Nobody wants an autograph. There's nothing wrong with that. That's human nature.
Is this your last tour?
I don't think so. I think there's some people that want this to be the last tour, but I hate to break it to them. I don't think so.